brave souls. Please leave a like and subscribe before we start. My story begins a few years ago. I decided to use my computer skills to run a small darknet forum, mainly just to share information without censorship. At first, I was extremely paranoid about my site getting hacked and having my anonymity compromised, so I went online and began to research everything that I would need to ensure my own safety. After countless days of scouring blogs, forums, and other material, I decided I was ready now. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't just buy a VPS and host the site offshore or whatever. So I decided to use my old laptop. After all, I wasn't planning on running a major website. So after setting the server up, and what I thought was literally every single thing I could to do harden it against attack, I put the site online. Everything went great for a couple of months, and donations rolled in as the user base grew larger and larger. After around 5 months, the user base had gotten so big, I had to upgrade and migrate everything to a new PC, which I built just to host the forum. And from there, everything seemed perfect. The site was running smoothly, and there were no issues with the migration, until one day when I came home and noticed the PC had frozen. I didn't think much to it. Maybe just a software bug caused it, so I rebooted, and that's when it was clear to me something was wrong. The PC lit up and beeped a few times, then shut off, so I thought to myself, okay, so it's a hardware issue. After a few hours trying to diagnose the issue, I figured it out, and it turned out the RAM had been corrupted. I took it back to the store since it was still under warranty. The customer rep just told me it might have just been a faulty stick. When I got home, I replaced the stick of RAM and had the site back up and running within a few hours. Everything seemed to be perfect again. I apologized to the users for the downtime, and everyone seemed to be happy enough. Fast forward a few more months. The forum's been up and running for around 1.5 years now. This is when things started to get really weird. I finished work on a Friday. It was a gorgeous day in the middle of summer. I came home, had something to eat, and sat down in front of my PC and noticed I had a message. Upon opening the message, I realized that somewhere I'd messed up now. Don't get me wrong, I'm not like Assange or anything, so I don't really know why anybody would actually target me, but the world is a crazy place, so whatever. The message had my details from my name, address, bank details, passwords, private emails, private messages, everything from nearly every single device I owned. I freaked out and immediately took the PC offline and turned my internet off. But little did I know that this guy had done his research. After a couple of hours pacing my room, I received a text message. I know everything about you. The message was sent via some type of SMS service, so there was no way to trace it, and then my phone rang. Don't talk, just listen. I know everything there is to know about you. All I want is 2 Bitcoins or things get worse. I'll send you a text with the wallet details. The phone call ended just as quickly as it started. I opened my laptop up and checked my Bitcoin wallet. There was enough left over from the donations just to pay this guy off and hope that would be the end of it. So I entered the guy's details and sent the payment. My phone rang again. Thank you for complying. Unfortunately, someone I know really likes you. He hung up, panicking. I tried calling the number back. An automated message began to play. The number you have dialed has not been recognized. A few hours passed, and I began to think to myself, well, maybe the last call was just him having fun, and decided after a long day, I'd just go to bed. Sometime around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of banging at my front door. I jumped out of bed and turned on all the lights, grabbing a knife from the kitchen. I walked slowly towards the window and looked out. I could see someone standing by a car. When they spotted me, they got in and drove off. I rushed to the door in hopes I might be able to get a license plate, but by the time I'd opened it, they'd already turned the corner. As I turned, I noticed an envelope on the floor. I picked it up, went back inside, and locked the door, closed the curtains, and sat in the kitchen. I placed the envelope on the counter and stared at it for around half an hour, trying to muster up the courage to open it. Did these guys really come to my home, I thought to myself. After the half hour was up, I decided enough was enough. I opened the envelope, and pictures fell out onto the counter. They were of me sleeping. These guys had not only been outside my house, they'd been inside whilst I was sleeping. The images had been edited, and strange love hearts had been added next to me. So now I was sufficiently freaked out. I didn't go back to sleep. And when the sun broke the darkness, I decided to head to the police station and tell them everything. I hadn't broken any laws, so I hoped they would just help me at least. After hours of explaining everything to them, they told me there was nothing they could do. At this point, I had never felt so alone in the world. I was scared of what this guy was planning for me. I didn't have the foggiest idea what I was supposed to do or expect, so I decided to wipe everything: my laptop, PC, and phone. I picked up everything I needed, stuffed it all into a bag, and decided to leave. I had a couple of friends that I knew I could rely on, so I called up my old buddy Marcus, and we met, had a few beers, and I explained everything to him. He offered me a place to stay, and I hoped that would be the end of it. How wrong I was. A few days later, it happened again. There was a knock at the door first thing in the morning. Me and Marcus both went out to find another envelope on the floor. The same thing, pictures of me sleeping, but these were in Marcus's house. I started freaking out again, and Marcus just said, "Okay, well, we need to do something. Maybe set a trap or something." So we went over numerous ideas. Everything you could think of, from cameras to baiting him. And we settled on the idea of staying up during the night and locking him in the room. We filled the bed up with pillows, set cameras, and even barred the windows in the room. We hid in the room next door. After a few hours had passed, we heard the lock rattling on the front door, and we knew it was game time. We'd left the door just slightly ajar so we could see outside as he went past. And the moment he went into the room, we both sprung to action quickly. As we could, we closed the door and locked it from outside. Using a chair and a metal bar, there was only one way he was getting out, and he'd have to destroy the door. We could see the silhouette of him as he paced the room quietly. It was creepy as hell. We called the police as we kept an eye on him. At last, I thought I could finish this and move on with my life. Just as the police arrived, we noticed the guy take a gun out and place it to his head. He held a sign up that read, "I love you," and he pulled the trigger. The police barged in, guns drawn, told us both to get the floor. We complied and shouted, "He's in there," pointing at the door. The police removed the makeshift lock and entered the room, called for an ambulance, and put me and Marcus in the back of a police car. I'd been sat in the interview room for a good couple of hours, I guess, whilst they carried out the investigation, when a detective came in and sat down in front of me, opening a folder and placing pictures on the table. "Do you know her?" "Her?" I said, looking at the pictures. "No," I replied, confused. He looked at me and said, "This is the person who's been stalking you." He then began to tell me they had visited her home and found a shrine with photos of me all over the place, from restaurants to the gym, even shopping. He went on to tell me that she'd been the one that sent the messages, made the phone calls, etc. And they'd also found a diary which had some kind of future plans for me and her. She wanted me to be her husband, and we'd been chatting for around a year and a half from the moment I started the forum After I explained everything the detective said, I was lucky to be alive. She had actually planned to drug me and kidnap me. She had even made some makeshift lock bed, so I wouldn't be able to escape. To this day, I feel lucky, and I haven't been on the dark web since. I had just started a summer job where I was basically a custodian, cleaning classrooms in preparation for the upcoming school year. My dad worked for the town's district, so he was able to get me this job. I was the youngest one there, as I'm only 20, and there are a handful of people who worked with me. They were usually off doing other tasks, like waxing the floors, or covering up foul writing on the walls with paint. The schools were empty, except for the staff who was cleaning. Things were going fine my first couple of weeks. For the most part, I was on my own wiping down desks and dusting while listening to music. It was nice, and I enjoyed not having someone on my ass all day telling me what to do. After I had finished cleaning the middle school, the head custodian sent me and another woman, we'll call her Karen, who was my coworker, to start cleaning the high school. She was a slacker who'd often go out to smoke cigarettes, but was a nice lady. She didn't care what I did, and always was off doing whatever she wanted. So yeah, basically I was alone. Again, I didn't mind because I liked the freedom, but I was taking up the bulk of the work. A few days had gone by, and I finished cleaning a couple of hallways. It was time to move to the basement, where the robotics and woodworking classes were. I didn't think anything of it until I got down there. I noticed the light was peeking through under the doorway of the classroom. The windows of the class were covered with shades. I found this odd since it was summer and no one was in the building besides Karen and I. I walked over and peeked in the door window. The lamp was on at the desk, but no one was inside. I proceeded to knock. No answer. After turning the knob, I realized the door was locked, so I used my key to open the door. A musty smell flooded my nose. I decided to scope out the room. Maybe someone had forgotten to turn the lamp off. I disregarded that idea when I noticed the computer at the teacher's desk was on. The screen looked weird. I'd never seen this layout before. The website was all black with red writing on it. It also had a chat box. I didn't have time to read the chat because a sudden voice came from the doorway. "Can I help you?" It was a man, maybe in his early 40s, about 6 feet. "Oh, sorry. I'm just cleaning the classrooms and I didn't know if anyone was in here," I said in an embarrassed tone. "Ah, so I see. Well, I appreciate that, but don't worry about it here. I'm, working on a few things, so sawdust is going to get everywhere again after you clean anyways." He said this in a very strange way, like he was hiding something. He walked over and sat at his desk while closing the browser. "Okay, no problem." I then proceeded to the door. "Wait, could I ask you a favor?" he said in a delirious way. Yeah, sure." I didn't really know what he was about to ask, and I couldn't find myself to say no. I just wanted to get out of there as I was already creeped out. "I have this, petition. It's to get more funding for the extracurricular classes, like art and woodworking." He sounded so uncertain, as if he made that up out of thin air. "Sure." I paused for a moment when he handed me the paper. It only had 2 other names on it. The petition required a full name, phone number, email, and address. I immediately felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to decline, so I just added my information. "Thank you so much, dear. You have a beautiful bone structure, by the way," he said, in such a creepy way. "Ah, thanks." I grabbed my cleaning supplies and speeded out of there. After that experience, I didn't really put much thought into it. Yes, he was creepy, but I didn't really have much evidence to persuade myself that he was out to get me or something, until I started running into him throughout the school. It became pretty frequent. It's as though he was watching me. Now I was concerned. I dismissed it because he'd just smile at me, or wave if I saw him. Maybe I was overreacting. I mean, he was a teacher there after all. Still, my gut feeling was telling me something wasn't right. Weeks went on and I started to notice him less and less. I only had a few more weeks at this job, and then back to college I go. One day, the boss let everyone out early, since it was almost 100 degrees. I got home and decided to hang out with some friends. It was a group of us, about 5 or 6. My boyfriend's brother joined us this time, which was unusual since he's not really a social person. He is really into technology, so he's always on his computer, which he built himself. He's also good at hacking and stuff like that. Anyway, that day, he told me he needed to talk to me, and it was serious. I was conceited, because we weren't close, so it must have been legit. He brought me into my friend's living room and pulled out his laptop. To my surprise, he was on the deep web. So, you are up for bid on the deep web? He hesitated. Wait, what? I knew how the deep web worked. I would often listen to horror stories, but I'd never been on it, so how would my info even be out there? It suddenly clicked. The web page matched the one I saw in the classroom a month back. I had also given my info to that guy. My heart felt like it dropped to my stomach. I explained this to my boyfriend's brother. He advised me to call the police immediately, which is what we did. They did an investigation on the teacher and found the activity on his computer. Not only that, but he had several girls' information along with pictures. Some of the girls were minors too. There were also wooden contraptions they found in his home, which he probably made in the shop. He probably planned to use them on these girls, or me. I was disgusted, but relieved that he was caught. I often wonder what would have happened if the page was never discovered. Would he have kidnapped me and killed me online for these sick people? I don't know, and I don't want to know. I changed my number and moved since the incident. This just goes to show you can never give out your personal information. I lost my left eye when I was only 7 years old. It was a stupid way to lose an eye, but luckily, most people tend not to ask how I lost it. I think the majority worry it might be insensitive. It's not a story I like to tell, not because it's upsetting or brings back bad memories. I just feel embarrassed by it. Growing up, my brother and I were obsessed with Robin Hood, the outlaw of Sherwood Forest, who would take from the rich and give to the poor. I'm not going to pretend this heroic savior of the poor was our hero because of his good deeds. We simply liked him because of his legendary skill with a bow and arrow. Our father, a keen gardener, had lots of bamboo sticks all piled up beside the shed, which he would tie plants to in order to stop them from drooping when they grew. It was my brother's idea to take one and attach a length of string to both ends to create a bow. I thought he was an absolute genius. When we had finished making the bow, we made an arrow simply by using a handsaw to carve a small groove into one end of an arrow-sized piece of bamboo, which would act as a nest for the string to sit. "I'm first," my brother said. "No," I cried. "It was my idea, so I get to shoot first." And that was that. At one end of the garden, there was a little wall that surrounded one of my father's flower patches. Upon the wall, we placed an empty plastic bottle to be used as our target. My brother, of course, then took the first turn, missing wildly and falling far short of the bottle on the wall. Next, it was my go, and I also missed it. It took about an hour before we had both knocked the bottle off the wall once. Right. Now you stand in the middle, and I'll shoot over your head at the target. Another genius idea by my brother. I didn't argue. I thought it was a cool thing to do, and if I did it, then my brother would have to let me have a go shooting over him. I don't believe he meant to do it. It was just a careless accident, but the arrow never made it past my body. It struck me hard and deep in my left eye. Straight away, blood poured down my cheek, and I screamed in agony. I spent a couple of days in hospital before the doctors decided they would have to remove what was left of my eye. Until I was 12, I wore an eye patch, but when I moved into secondary school, I decided to get my first glass eye to try and put an end to the pirate jokes. It might sound weird, but I loved my glass eye, and by the time I was 16 and leaving school, I had collected dozens, all different colors and designs. My missing eye stopped being something I tried to hide, and strangely became my kind of signature. Kids would say, "Have you seen the boy with a spiral in his eye? Or have you seen the lad with an eye like a cat?" I enjoyed this. It allowed me to embrace my injury and make it part of my identity. I carried on collecting glass eyes for many years, always on the lookout for new designs or something different from what I already had. When I was 25, I discovered the dark web. A friend from my Dungeons and Dragons club told me about how he had used it to buy some sort of hallucinogenic. I didn't plan on using the dark web for anything like that. I was just intrigued by the idea of it. Once I was on, I started looking for stores. It was amazing and disgusting. People selling guns, drugs, services, and even other people. It made me feel a little bit ill, knowing I was now a part of this strange, illicit world. I went on to one store page, which called itself Mr. Bubble's Objects of Trouble, which was the first store I had come across that had a search bar. So I thought, fuck it, let's see if they have any. I typed in the words glass eye. I didn't expect anything to come up, and I was rather surprised when a match popped up on my screen. The item was called the Sight of Sin, which was simply a black eye with a small red number 7 on it. It pulled at my fancy, so I decided to buy it. I didn't truly expect it to show up, but 1 week later a package arrived, and there it was. As customary with all my new eyes, I washed the eye in a solution to make sure it was clean. When washed, I put it in a case with the rest of my eyes and went back to watching television. The next morning, when I woke up, I thought I'd test out the new eye to see if it was a good fit, to check how comfortable it was. It went in with ease and felt absolutely perfect, so I decided to leave it in for the rest of the day. Nothing strange happened at first. It was just my usual daily routine of having breakfast and doing some work on my laptop. But then the doorbell rang. As I opened the door, I immediately knew something wasn't right. I had double vision all of a sudden. Only one man was standing on my front doorstep trying to sell me solar panels, but I could see him twice. One image of him was completely ordinary, just the bloke dressed in a suit, holding a brochure, and telling me about how he could save me money on my electricity bill. But the other image, well, it was him, but dressed up in a gimp suit, cracking a whip against the floor lustfully. I don't think I said a word to him. I just stared transfixed by what I was seeing. Eventually, I closed the door and stood there for a moment, trying to understand what had just happened. I passed it off at the time as just my mind playing tricks on me, and that I must be overtired. I decided to take a nap. I was woken by a telephone call from my father, asking if I was still coming to his house for dinner. I looked at the time and realized I was running late, so I grabbed my coat and flew out the door. On my way to my father's house, which is just a 10-minute walk down the road from mine, I walked past just one person, a lady, walking her dog, but again, I saw double. In one image, she was completely ordinary, apart from being overweight. She was wearing a pink coat, and beside her, a dog trotted along, minding its own business. But in another part of my vision, I could see her again, completely naked, eating tinned dog food with a fork. Jellied meat dripped down onto breasts, which she licked ravenously. I was almost sick. I thought about just going home and going back to bed, still trying to convince myself I was simply tired from working. But my father missed not having me at home, and I didn't want to let him down. Though now I wish I did. Now, what happened next won't make much sense unless I explain something. When I was 2 years old, my mother died. I say died. She was killed whilst walking home from work one night on this very estate. Nobody has ever been caught in relation to her murder, but now I know exactly who took my mother from me. My father opened the door with a large grin on his face. "Come in, son," he said cheerily, but I did not move. Besides the image of my father standing in the doorway was another vision of him holding a knife, and lying beneath him on the floor was my mother, soaked in blood, eyes vacant and still. I took a step back from my father and did not stop running until I had reached the front door of my house. Straight away, I went onto the dark web and searched for Mr. Bubble's store, but it had gone, vanished, like it had never been there. I didn't leave the house for a few days. I didn't answer the door. I didn't even pick up the phone. What I did was sit by the window looking out onto the street, watching the people walking past. I think I know what I'm seeing now. It makes little sense, but it's the only thing I can think of that almost explains what I'm seeing. Firstly, when I remove the glass eye, I no longer see two images of everyone. I only see one just like I always have, but when the eye is in, I see two visions of every person I look at in the flesh. Secondly, I think I know what I am seeing. I am seeing their sins. I know that sounds utterly mad, but it's the only thing all this seems to point to. The name of the glass eye, the red number 7, and the grotesque and disturbing images I see. I believe it's their sins I am seeing with my new eye. I see the true hideous nature of people, the part of themselves they hide from everyone else. I know I could just take the eye out and forget about it, but I just can't bring myself to do this. I can't trust anybody without it. I can't see the real them. But seeing people's darkest secrets also leaves me alone. For once you see the hidden nature of someone you never want to be close to them again. Many questions remain. Why does this eye allow me to see these things? Who made it? How did it end up on the dark web? I need to know the answer to these questions. So please, if anyone out there has any information on the eye, or if anyone has ever come across Mr. Bubble's Objects of Trouble store, then please get in touch. Please. Don't forget to show your support by giving it a thumbs up. Your likes and comments help me continue creating content you'll love. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to my channel so you won't miss out on more exciting stuff.